Well, this here is the all-new Audi Q5, and yes, it does look like the outgoing and old Audi Q5, but that's because the designers at Audi felt that that car was already such a big hit, so why change a winning formula? But the bigger question is that, is this car better than the new Volvo XC60, the Land Rover Discovery Sport, as well as the Mercedes GLC? We'll find that out on the show today. Well, in terms of the design language, the Q5 comes across as very predictable and plays it safe, just like most other Audi cars. There isn't any main element which stands out, unlike the XC60, which has that iPad-like device, as well as the Mercedes GLC, which has those air turbine-like AC vents. This one, the only big standout feature, of course, is the virtual cockpit theme, which we've already seen in the A4 as well as the Q7. What you will also miss is that flowing AC vent, which the Q7 as well as the A4 has. So yes, in terms of the design language, it isn't the sharpest, but where you can't find any fault with is with the overall quality of this car. The quality levels inside this car are absolutely phenomenal. Even the smaller switches over here have a nice and tactile feel, and these switches over here have a touch sensor, so even before you touch them, the sensor decides and knows that you are of course wanting to use them, and the icons on this system pop out. Well, Audi's MMI system is pretty nice and easy to operate, but it isn't as intuitive to use as the Volvo system as well as the systems on BMW cars, so that's maybe something that Audi can improve on. Also, you will miss out on a touchscreen device because this one is not touchscreen, and also it does not go in and go out like it used to on the earlier car. What you will of course like about this car are the utility places, because you get a huge tray over here where you can of course charge your phones. You also get a little place over here where you can keep those coins, and the door bins are also large enough to house those big 1 liter bottles, and the glove box has a nice and soft drop feel to it, so it gives you a sense of luxury. In terms of overall seat comfort, these seats are pretty good and the support is decent, but as I just said, they're slightly behind the Volvo XC60 now, which is the class leader in terms of not only comfort but also opulence and relaxation. Even though the Q5's cabin is high class in terms of materials, it still doesn't have the same opulent or ultra luxurious feel that the Mercedes GLC's cabin has to display. Well, so here I'm in the second row of the Q5's cabin, and the headroom, as you can see, is pretty good. Knee room also is more than adequate, and you get your own AC vents as well as your own climate control zone, making it a car which offers you 3 climate control zones, 2 in the front and 1 at the back. The only issue over here is that the hump in the floor panel is not only very long, it's also very tall, so it is in essence only a 2-seater at the back, unlike some of its rivals which are 3-seaters, and this seat over here in the middle also is pretty small, so it is a decent place for a kid maybe who's about 7 or 8 years old, but for adults they will not enjoy sitting in the middle, so it is only a 2-seater. And of course you can pull out this armrest and sit here like the boss after that stressful meeting with the CEO. One area where the Q5 truly impresses is in the boot department. It's a nice and square boot. It's a boxy boot, which means that there's plenty of place to keep your odds and ends. There is a slight lip over here, but it's not too much. You can easily lift things over it or pull things out, and it is a good car for those airport transfers to transport your mother-in-law's luggage back home in. And what's more, you also get an electronic tailgate because it is an Audi and you shouldn't have to do things manually. Well, so this Audi Q5 comes with the same 2-liter engine that we've already seen on an entire range of Audi and VW and Skoda cars. This one makes about 190 bhp of power, and performance is pretty good. 0 to 100 comes up in just about 8 seconds, and all that power is transmitted to all 4 wheels via a 7-speed S-tronic gearbox. Now this is a quattro car, which means that power is sent to all 4 wheels, but to be honest, most people will never really enjoy the full power of quattro or will ever take this car off-roading, because people buy these kind of cars for sheer luxury as well as relaxation, and those are 2 departments where the Q5 is pretty good. And why do I say that? Well, simply because the steering wheel on this car is ultra light. It's a very easy and light steering to operate, and most Audi buyers really do like it that way. Now, why do I say that this is a very relaxing car to drive? Well, simply because the engine is very muted. It's a very quiet engine. It does not feel like a diesel engine. In fact, the noise, vibration and harshness levels inside this car are very good. In fact, this car's cabin is very well isolated, not only from the engine noise but also from the tire and wind noises. And even at higher speeds on the highway, there is minimal noise intrusion into the cabin. It really is a very well isolated cabin from whatever's happening on the outside. What you'll also like is this ultra light steering wheel. Most buyers really appreciate the light nature of the steering wheel. Now, it is of course devoid of too much feel. It's not like a BMW X3 or even a Land Rover Discovery Sport steering wheel, which has some feel in it. But buyers in this segment and customers who drive their cars themselves really prefer this steering wheel because it's nice and easy to operate, especially when they are in the city and have to maneuver their way around that tight parking space. Now, the Q5 comes with Audi's Drive Select system, which means that you can of course change the setting over here by using the dynamic, comfort or the auto and off-road modes. But even in its most dynamic setting, the steering wheel on this car isn't as sharp or as quick-witted or as communicative as some of its rivals. But Audi engineers say that that's the way their customers like their cars. What you will also like is the nice and pliant ride, and that has been achieved by a very chunky tire setup. They have a wide section of rubber, and the side walls also have decent amounts of cushioning on them. So this car offers you a nice and cushiony ride. It's a very supple ride, and even at higher speeds this car feels very stable. It feels very rock solid. In fact, it doesn't really drive like an SUV. It drives like a nice and tall saloon car, and that is an achievement for a car which weighs nearly 2 tons. Well, the buzzword inside the Q5 is of course performance, and this diesel engine is very quick. It's also a very fuel efficient engine, and Audi claims a figure of about 17 kpl for the Q5 in this diesel engine form. And going by our previous experiences with Audi cars, I think that is a figure which can be believed and should be closer to the truth, unlike some other manufacturers. Well, if you drive primarily in the city, you'll also appreciate the fact that this car's overall visibility is very good from this seat. You get excellent visibility up ahead. The pillar is nice and chunky, but it's not overtly chunky that you can't look around it. The rear view mirrors also have a wide range to contend with, so you can get a good view of whatever's happening behind you. And even the last window is pretty big. So if you aren't someone who does truly depend on the parking sensors around, then you will really have no issues driving this car and parking it into your building, because visibility is excellent all across. Now, you can also use this S-tronic gearbox manually by using these pedal shifters behind the steering wheel, and it is a quick-witted gearbox. It is a trait which most Audi cars have, and both upshifts and downshifts are very good and very quick. There's hardly any lag. In fact, there's no lag. Now, the suspension setup on this car feels a little bit towards the softer side, so when you are pushing it into corners, there is a lot of body roll, but even then the traction of the tires is very good. There's a lot of grip available. The braking is excellent, and you never really feel nervous when you're pushing into corners, because you know that the handling also is pretty decent. Well, one area where this 2-liter engine really is supreme is in terms of refinement, and I think that this is probably one of the best, if not the best, diesel engine under 2 liters in terms of sheer refinement. No matter where you are driving this car, if you're starting it off from cold or revving it hard on the highway, this engine remains the last word in terms of overall refinement and quietness levels. And in fact, I say this quite often, but it really holds very true for the Q5. If you are sitting in the back seat, you won't be able to tell if it's a diesel or a petrol which is powering it. And even if you are driving this car in the front seat, you won't be able to tell if it's a diesel or a petrol, because the responsive nature of this engine really is very good. It starts responding from a relatively low RPM, which means that it really does behave like a petrol motor rather than a diesel one. Well, most buyers who buy these cars don't really take them off-roading, but it's always good to know that in case you do decide to take it off-roading, you can always use the Quattro system here, and you can use the Drive Select system, and you can choose the off-road mode, which sends its power accordingly to each wheel, deciding and figuring out which one needs better traction. Now, the Q5 misses out on air suspension. It does not come with that, unlike some other rivals, but it does get adaptive suspension, which means that the ride quality, which is already very good, is improved even further. So it doesn't matter what kind of surfaces you're driving on. You might be tackling rumble strips, you might be tackling badly patched up roads, You might be going at faster highway speeds. This car's suspension will remain absolutely brilliant, and it'll really cushion the ride and offer you a very cool setting and a very relaxed ride. And really, it is an excellent long distance cruiser because it has a very refined engine, a light steering wheel, excellent visibility all across, and a very supple suspension setup. This car's long distance cruising ability really is second to none. Well, so even though the Q5 comes across as a luxurious and refined package, do remember that other cars in this segment offer you more or less the same qualities at more affordable prices, as well as more luxurious cabins. So even though this is a great car and you should consider it in your shortlist, don't forget to check out our review of the Volvo XC60 as well as the Mercedes GLC and the Land Rover Discovery Sport before you make a buying decision. Bye for now and hope to see you soon.